Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you. If drafted, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve. So, takes care of that. I'm a radio man. I'm a radio man for 40-some years, doing an old variety show based on some I used to hear when I was your age, long ago. Critics pointed out my debts to Fibber McGee and Bob and Ray, but alcohol and cigarettes swept those critics all away. And to 20-year-olds who were born too late to hear the great Fred Allen, I'm the inventor of the form, sailing the airwaves like Magellan. A thief who escapes and is not hung may yet be honored by the young. The secret of a long career is to keep going and not fade and not think about your reputation even for 1 minute. It's like becoming the tallest boy in the 6th grade. You stick around and you're bound to win it. Dostoevsky, over time, found a punishment to fit the crime, and slowly, as a centipede trots off, he wrote The Brothers Karamazov. Mrs. Joyce cried out in bliss, he's finally finished with Ulysses. James had a smoke and took a break and started in on Finnegan's Wake. So do your work, keep going straight ahead, and you may be a genius someday after you are dead. I got up this morning in St. Paul, Minnesota, on the banks of the Mississippi. I grew up on the banks of the Mississippi, out there where the land is flat. Grew up in the cornfields of Minnesota. So we boys loved the Mississippi because it was a valley, and so it was more secretive. We sat there by the river throwing stones at it, flat stones. You threw them sidearm so they would skip on the water, throwing them through the rapids. As water flowed over stones, you threw your flat stones to skip them 4, 8, 9, 10, 12 times. And we did that for years, not knowing why. It was just what we did. Passed the time, a form of meditation. We were happy, I think we were. We thought we were at the time. Then other things intervened, of course. I wanted to become a writer. I wanted to be, bless you, I wanted to be a writer, and this happened when I came out to New York. I was 12 years old, and my father was talking with my mother in the kitchen. We were a family of 6 children, had no money. My dad was a clerk in the post office. My mother was a clerk in a department store. She worked in the basement store, the bargain store. And we lived on an acre with a half-acre garden behind it, growing our own tomatoes and cucumbers and corn. We had no money. We were sanctified brethren. We believed in the Scripture. The Scripture was literally true. We believed that Jesus would come at any moment and take us up to unimaginable, indescribable glory and eternal bliss. And meanwhile, we lived here on earth with the rest of you. We believed that we were on earth to serve the Lord and to stay away from worldly things. I stayed away, but I liked people who liked worldly things and liked to be around them. And so when I heard my father talking to my mother, he was going to go to New York, I wanted to go so badly. I thought of it as the world capital of worldliness. I begged my mother, and she worked on my father. He had a very thin excuse for coming to New York. He was going to drive a brand new Pontiac to New York as a favor to the neighbor of my uncle. And the neighbor's son was a captain in the army stationed in Germany. And one of the privileges of an army captain was to have an American car shipped to him in Germany by ship. And so my father was going to drive this new Pontiac all the way out to New York to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where it would be put aboard a ship and sent off to Germany. My mother did not see why the father of 6 children should go gallivanting off all by himself, scot-free, and enjoy a couple of weeks in New York. And so she made him take me, and he did. I was my father's ball and chain, and we came out. It was stunning, so amazing to leave the Mississippi River behind and come to New York City, the streets full of pushcart peddlers in 1953. Strange languages. Everywhere you looked, there were 27 different things to look at. We saw the Empire State Building, we rode the Staten Island Ferry, we went to Coney Island, we went to Ebbets Field and saw the Dodgers play. We did all of it, rode out to the Statue of Liberty, and I stood up in the crown. But the amazing thing was the city itself, so full of things to look at. I absorbed it all. All you had to do was just watch and listen and look. Only 2 times was I asked to do something. My father once asked me when he visited friends in Brooklyn to say the prayer before supper, and I could not bring myself to do it. We went up to the 87th floor of the Empire State Building, and there was a booth where it said, "Record your voice." And he pushed me in and dropped the quarters in the slot, and the red light went on, and I was supposed to say something. There was a microphone there, and I could see that people standing around on the observation deck were watching, were listening. They could hear what I was going to say. And my father, and I sang in a very quiet, tremulous voice, "Jesus wants me for a sunbeam to shine for him each day." It was all I could think of to do. And I saw people turn away. They were disappointed. We stayed with his friends. My dad had been stationed in New York during the war. He was in the Army Post Office down there on 8th Avenue in the building with the big columns and the inscription on the top about snow and rain and sleet and dark of night, and staying these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. And he wanted to see these friends from back in his war days. They lived over in Brooklyn, Dawn and Betty. They lived on the 5th floor, and it was a hot summer in New York. No air conditioning, of course, and we couldn't sleep. He and I were sleeping on the sofa. He was on a mattress on the floor. We couldn't sleep, so we got up and we went for a walk. In the middle of the night, we walked around the corner, and across the street was a park where hundreds of families were lying out on sheets and blankets they had spread on the grass, and men sitting on park benches in the perimeter of the park. I could see the glow of their cigarettes. We went into a candy store. We got cream sodas, and we drank them sitting on the curb, and then went back up, walked up to the 5th floor and back to the apartment, and brought the mattress out and laid it on the landing of a fire escape, looking through grill work 5 stories down, headlights going by below. You don't get to do that in Minnesota, ever. It was so fascinating. But the point of the story is that when I got back and went into the 6th grade. I was the only boy in Benson School in the 6th grade, the only person in the whole school to have been to New York City. I was an authority now. And they asked me what I had done. Did you ride on? Yes, I did. I did. We rode on the roller coaster. Yes, there are trains that go through tunnels under the streets, and they're packed with people, including colored people, Negroes. Wow, they were astonished. I had been on a train with Negroes. We'd barely seen one where I grew up in my little town. Sometimes people would drive through. It was I had authority. There's nothing like having fresh material. So, this is what makes you a writer. One thing is when you know something other people don't know, you write about it. I gave a report. I passed postcards around to the classroom. The 5th grade was allowed to come in and join us for this occasion. It was a large moment in the history of Benson School. And I told them all about it, except the part about Jesus wants me for a sunbeam. I left that out. No, it was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience coming to New York. When I went into the 8th grade, I had a teacher, English teacher named Frayne Anderson, and the only thing I remember about him, only one thing do I remember, well, two. He wore steel rim eyeglasses. What I remember about him was the day I walked into his classroom and he handed me a copy of the New Yorker magazine. And he said, I thought this would interest you. I come from a Reader's Digest family. National Geographic. We were not a New Yorker family. I looked at it and I loved what I read. I loved everything about it. I mean, I did love the advertisements too. There were advertisements for Pan American Airways and flights to Asia and such a thing, and hand-woven baskets and French. What I really loved was the writing. A.J. Liebman and John Cheever was in it, and S.J. Perlman. And I read them over and over, and I became a lifelong fan of A.J. Grew up in New York and who wrote about New York lowlife and wrote about Louisiana and wrote about newspapers and wrote about France and wrote about World War II and boxing. He was a beautiful writer. I still have this magazine. 35 cents it cost, and on the cover is a drawing of a man, a farmer, who has a serving girl who is helping him get his boots off. And she has his left leg between her legs, and his right leg is planted on her rear end, and she is pulling off his boot with both hands. I could show it to you if I had it, but I still haven't. And so that was my ambition then, to write for that magazine, an ambition so extravagant that I never told anybody about it. So that's my experience with New York. New York was the faraway place where when you went there, your senses were filled. All you had to do was be a blank piece of paper and just let it all print on you. You didn't have to say a thing or perform in any way. I woke up this morning in St. Paul thinking of coming to New York. The house was cold. There was ice on the window looking out on the Mississippi. I got out of bed. The floor was cold. I'm married to Nanook of the North, and she's very conscientious about this, and I got up and I cranked up the heat so I could take a shower. I got in the shower and she walked in. She said, I saw the thermostat turned up to 82. She said, are we expecting elderly people for breakfast? I said, well, the temperature was in the low 60s, so we compromised at 62, 63. It was nice getting up this morning. She looked at me in the shower, looked at me with interest, I thought. And after 20 years, that's always rewarding. She said, what are you going to do in New York at the 92nd Street Y? I said, I'm going to tell them that the reason we tell stories is stories are memorable. You can remember them. The same reason we write poems that rhyme and have meter, because they are memorable. Back in school, Miss Fleischman required us to memorize, when in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and think upon myself and curse my fate. You will remember that for the rest of your life. You will have 14 lines in your head, beautiful lines, about the power of love to banish sorrow. The power of love. But thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings, that I would scorn to change my lot with kings. This is worth carrying around in your head. You also have, there was a young couple named Kelly who were found lying belly to belly because in their haste they used library paste instead of petroleum jelly. Take your choice. We tell stories because they are memorable, and we carry them with us wherever we go. Ralph Waldo Emerson was a brilliant writer. I love to read Ralph Waldo Emerson. I can't remember 2 paragraphs of Ralph. Ralph wrote sentences, and they were great sentences, but you forget them the moment you snap the book shut. We tell stories because we remember them. The story of the Passover is memorable. The story of the prodigal son is memorable. Preachers get up in front of people on Sunday morning, and they have these little sheets of paper on the lectern, and they read an essay to people, and they wonder why nobody remembers this. Because it's a little literary exercise, and there's nothing there. There's no reason ever to speak to people from a text. If you believe in something, you'll remember it. There. Well, now that's worth your coming to hear. Now you know. Now you know. No, I valued those poems a few years ago when I suffered a stroke. I had a stroke. I was at a friend's house for a party. It was on a fall afternoon. I just felt kind of woozy, and it felt as if there was a balloon expanding in my head. And I wasn't going to fall down, but I knew something was wrong. And when people asked me, are you all right? I said, no, I'm fine. And I went out and I got in my car thinking this might not be a good thing, but let's see. And I drove over to St. Paul, about 12 miles, and I drove to United Hospital. And I left the car in the parking lot with the keys in it in case, I couldn't tell where I was parked. And I walked into the emergency room, and I walked right up to the desk, and I said, I think I'm having a stroke, which gets their attention right away. So they put me on a gurney and wheeled me back into, where they pull the cloth drapes, and this young Chinese woman neurologist did a little tap, 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 and scrape, poke, 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 and held up fingers, what's your name, what day is it, who's president, and then she asked me if I could get undressed, which, when a woman asks you that, you want to be able to do that, and so I did. She gave me 2 little gowns, little flowery gowns, like your grandma wears. They don't have a special one with sailboats and anchors on it. They just the one, and so they put you on a gurney and wheel you up to radiation, and you are put onto a platform on a rail. And this platform is about exactly the size of a coffin, and they run you up so that your head and shoulders are inside the cyclotron, and there are 25 minutes of banging and wanging and buzzing and dinging and hammering, and then they release you, and you wait for the results. The neurologist came to give me the results, and she asked me how I felt. I said, I feel fine. I feel fine. She said, do you have, is your memory reaching for things and not finding them? I said, no, my memory has never been better. I think it's a good strategy, when you're in the hospital, to tell them everything is just fine. And hope that the test proves you out. I told her a joke, just to prove that I still had my faculties. I told her the joke about Ole, who lay on his deathbed dying, and then he smelled Lena's rhubarb pie from the kitchen below, and he made his way crawling down the stairs and into the kitchen, and there it was on the counter, and he reached into the drawer for a knife and was going to cut himself a slice, and Lena came up behind him and whacked him one upside the head. She said, Ole, that's for the funeral, leave it alone. She thought this was a little perverse, I think. She didn't laugh. I was surprised. I thought it was a very funny joke. So I told her the joke about the man and his wife who run into a bridge abutment, and they're both killed, and they go to heaven, and there is this beautiful golf course, and he walks up to the first tee, and he drives, and he hits a hole-in-one, and he turns to his wife and says, if you hadn't made me stop smoking, we could have been here a long time ago. Well, she didn't think that was funny either. Maybe it was her training, maybe it was her cultural background, I don't know. But I told her my favorite joke, and she thought that was reasonably humorous. 3 men die on the same day, and they're ushered to the gates of heaven, and the angel of the Lord says, so, what's your story? What happened? You, sir. And the first man says, well, I came home from work, and I took the elevator up to the 21st floor at my condo, and I knew something was wrong. I heard sounds in the apartment, and I opened up the door, and my wife screamed, and she ran into the bathroom, locked the door, and I ran in, and there was man's clothing scattered around on the floor, and I went into the kitchen, and nobody in there, and I walked out on the balcony, and there he was. He was hanging on to the balcony, and he was naked, and I stomped on his fingers, and he wouldn't let go. And then I went into the kitchen looking for a hammer, and I saw the refrigerator. I pulled the refrigerator out. It was on rollers, and I rolled it back and forth across his hands there until finally he let go. But then the refrigerator started to go over the edge, and I tried to catch it, and it went over, and I went with it. So that's how I came here. The angel of the Lord said to the second man, "So, sir, what happened?" He said, I came home from work, and I took the elevator up to my condo on the 22nd floor, and I was going to take a shower, and I took off my clothes, and then I decided to go out on my balcony because they were going to replace the railing, and they hadn't. And I went, and then I lost my balance, and I fell off my balcony, but I managed to catch myself on the balcony below. And I was hanging there, and then this maniac came out and was stomping on my fingers, and then he got a refrigerator, and he rolled it back and forth, and I couldn't hold on, and so I fell down. The angel of the Lord said to the third man, "So, sir." He said, "Well, I was inside this refrigerator." You can remember this story. You can remember your own story. You can. There's as long as there is an action and a sequence, and there are people involved, you can remember this. Ideas, no. This is what I've come to tell you here at the 92nd Street Y. This is why we tell stories. I prize stories as I get older, and more I try to recover stories from my own past. I'm alarmed at large gaps back there. The MRI results came back, by the way. I left that off, that story. I didn't finish that story. She got the results back, and she showed me this murky map of my brain, this brainscape, and she pointed to where the blood clot had been fired by my heart up into the brain, and it landed in what neurologists call a silent part of the brain, which is a part where not much is going on, and which some people have more of than others, and kind of the Wyoming of the brain, and or the Iowa, I don't know. It landed up really close to this little intersection where language comes from. Very, very close, and close to where large motor skills are headquartered up there. So it was a lucky thing. How can you feel fear as a result of a close escape like that? You feel tremendously fortunate, and I do. I wake up in the morning in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I feel enormously lucky. I'm finishing 42 years doing a radio show for which I have no aptitude whatsoever. The things that I had an aptitude for were things were lonely things, menial, repetitive work, dishwashing, parking cars, writing, the most menial job there is, to sit and write and rewrite and rewrite. And I was lonely, and I wanted to do something where I would have friends and companions, and so I went into radio. And you have a crew, you have stagehands, you have production assistants, you have musicians, you've got actors, all of these people. It's very, very sociable. It's a wonderful, wonderful line of work. Hard work, but nonetheless. 42 years, so that's my great accomplishment, and especially coming from sanctified brethren, people. So I feel good about that. I feel good about that. I come out of my house, I'm 73 years old, and go for a walk, even on a winter morning like today, and all these people are running past you, running or hobbling or loping, limping, galloping. Some of them lean people, some sort of jiggly people, and they're all after longevity, which I achieved without any effort on my part, just moving forward slowly in a straight line. They're interesting people. I would like to talk to them when I see them going by, except they got little things in their ears, and so you can't. And they're panting, some of them, rather hard, poor things. No, it's worth it, longevity, because we're enormously lucky, and you don't realize that until you get to be a certain age. Tremendously lucky. All the things that we have that we didn't have back in the day, you see. Things like cash cards. We had to write out checks for cash, and even small amounts, arouse suspicion on the part of the teller. You always got the oldest lady teller with strange hair pulled way back tight, and she had a grimace, and she had enormous eyebrows like fruit bats, and she squinted at you, and then she disappeared with your check, and she went to talk to somebody, and then she asked for identification, and she glared at you. It was only for $20, for heaven's sake, and you had to go through this process just because you had longish hair and you had a beard, and you wore an odd sort of carpet vest and bell bottoms. You had to go through this long process, and now you just slip this card into a machine and press 4 numerals, and nobody asks there's nothing sociopathic in a magnetic strip. You just get your money, for heaven's sake. This is so different than it was back in the day. Beer, you have artisan beer now. You have people talking about beer and its breadiness and its oakiness. I mean, beer used to be just beer. There was domestic, there was foreign. It was cold, and that's all you needed. And now there are floral overtones and so on. This is so entirely. The GPS, which came about through defense research, through war, preparation for war, things we marched in the street against, gave us the GPS, this beautiful invention that we use every single day. And this lovely woman, Australian, I think, who gives you directions in this sweet voice. Somebody you're not married to tells you where to go. And if you miss the turn, there's no recrimination. She just recalculating route. I mean, it's only a route. There are other routes, not one is not morally superior to another. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Soft butter we did not have back in the day. I'm talking to these high school kids now, and the rest of you talk among yourselves. We did not have soft butter, children, back in the day. We had hard bricks of butter. And you had to scrape these shavings of butter off it to put on your toast in the morning. And we did not have artisan bread back then. After your grandma died, there was no artisan bread, and so you had Wonder Bread, which was like Kleenex, and you toasted it in the morning, and you spread this hard shards of butter on it, and it ripped it to pieces, so that your day began with disappointment. And you just figured life was going to have a lot of problems in it for you. You couldn't even spread butter on something, for heaven. There were no grief counselors back in the day. Nowadays, Nowadays, they send grief counselors every time they have a test in school. I mean, they're helping kids. We were told to get over it, just get over it. You know, move on. That's what they said to us. Now you have grief counselors that help you get through it. You get through it, you see. The schools are much more therapeutic than they used to be. We suffered back then in the days of cruelty. This was before Montessori. There was no such thing back in the day. All of that sweetness on the part of children, it didn't exist. Not out on the open prairie, it did not. Winter made them mean, and I had a nickname when I was in school. They called me Wiener, and I heard that a dozen times a day. It was very cruel, and I suffered from it. But there was no counseling for me. You know, you had to just bear with it. That's all. I still suffer from it today. There are a lot of triggers that set off this feeling of pain. Any reference to sausage of any kind or any elongated objects. Anyway, that's my problem, and I guess I should just get over it. Language is so different now. The synergy, words like that, transparency we didn't have back in the day. We didn't talk about it. It was a world of shadows, and we never expected to know everything, for heaven's sake. Totally. We never use the word totally. I hear my daughter use that all the time. She's 18. Totally. It was totally awesome. We would never use that. Everything was partial back in the day. Just sort of all right. And I liked parts of it, you know. We were evangelical people, and so, you know, we believed in the second coming. And when Jesus came down through the clouds, that would be awesome, of course. But I mean, you wouldn't use the word awesome to refer to somebody's hair, you know. It was just different. Individuality we have nowadays, all the names given. I come from the age of Larry and Joanne and Susan, maybe. A few Sarahs, but mostly Joanne, Larry, Linda. That was pretty much it. Gary, Larry, Joanne, and Linda. Now you've got Ava, you've got Isabella, you've got Sophia, kids, little Lutheran girls in small towns in the Midwest with Mediterranean names. You have Benjamin and Noah and Jonah, all over. Little Lutheran boys being, Jewish. And this is so different from the way that it used to be. Now it's a whole other world. We should be grateful. But we had stories. We had stories back in the day, especially if you grew up sanctified brethren, because they didn't have television. You shouldn't have television because that brought Hollywood right into the home, and that brought a tolerance of iniquity and brought in movies in which people drank and smoked, and so this made it seem normal, so we didn't have television. We had radio because you couldn't see the smoking and the drinking, but it was there. We didn't listen to dance music. There was no dancing, no movies, of course. So in place of it, there were stories. Your aunts took you aside and they told you your family history and how your family came from Yorkshire in 1774. They were offered free passage to Canada because the British had driven out the French from Nova Scotia. And so your family came over from Yorkshire on the basis of false promises. And they tried to farm and raise corn in saltwater meadows and in stony fields. The main crop was stones in Nova Scotia. Every spring, the earth would throw up a fresh crop of stones. And they would go around with a cart and a horse and pick them up and then they kept planting corn. My people were cursed with persistence. Other people would have given up and moved south, but my people stayed there. Meanwhile, the French who'd been driven out, they got down to Louisiana. They had Mardi Gras, they had accordions, they had dancing, they had blackened catfish, they had everything good. And they had this sense of resentment that they could nurse and work for sympathy for the next 300 years. And they got a major poem out of it. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's Weep Fest, Evangeline, about her looking for her lost love. Gabriel, give me a break. My people were up there picking up rocks and putting them into carts. No, we got this beautiful sense of family history from our people because there was nothing else to do. We just sat around an oilcloth table with a kerosene lantern and we told stories. I went to Thanksgiving once with my family, my father's family. They were getting old, the aunts and the uncles, but they still put on this whopping big feast. And Uncle Bill Loucks, Loucks, French name, they tried to anglicize it. Uncle Bill Loucks, who was always unusual, stood up after everybody had had seconds and thirds of turkey and potatoes, and before the pies were brought out to be divided, Uncle Bill Loucks stood up. There was a microphone there so that people could hear the table grace. It was a big room. It was an American Legion Hall in Lake Wobegon, and there was a microphone so that when Uncle Lawrence got up to thank the Lord for this feast and bringing us all together and asking traveling mercies on those who would be driving home that evening, there was a microphone, and it was still on. And Bill Loucks came to the microphone. And he cleared his throat. And he was about to say something, and then he didn't say it. And he sang us a song. He sang us a ballad. And it was not about Jesus. This is memorable. You remember this forever. Why did he do this? I can't imagine. And now he's dead, and I have no chance to ask him. He was an entertainer, I think, and we were all just a little bit too placid and sleepy after the turkey. And he thought we needed something memorable, and he gave us that moment. And the song that he sang, I've remembered for all of these years. It fell upon a holy day, there's many in the year. Sergeant Musgrave went to church to see fine ladies there. And some were dressed in velvet red, and some in velvet pale. And then came Lord Barnard's wife, the fairest of them all. She cast an eye on Sergeant Musgrave, as bright as summer sun. Said Musgrave unto himself, this lady's heart I've won. Oh, I have loved you, fair lady, for long and many's the day. And I have loved you, Sergeant Musgrave, and never a word did say. I've a house in Bucklesford, Barry, that is my heart's delight. I'll take you there with me if you lie in my arms tonight. But there stood by a little foot page who was Lord Barnard's man, and through the woods and across the river to his lord he ran. Oh, my Lord Barnard, you are a man of life. But Musgrave, he's at Bucklesford, Barry, in the arms of your wedded wife. If this be true, my little foot page, this thing that you tell me, then all the gold in Bucklesford, Barry, I gladly will give to thee. If this be false, my little foot page, this thing that you tell me, from the tallest tree in Bucklesford Barry, hanged you shall be. Go saddle me the black, he said, go saddle me the gray, and sound you not your horns, he said, lest our coming be betrayed. But there was one in Lord Barnard's train who loved the Sergeant Musgrave. He blew his horn both loud and shrill, away, Musgrave, away. And Musgrave, he heard the horn in the bower where he lay. I think I hear your husband's men, I wish I were away. Lie still, said the lady fair, and hug me from the cold. It's only a little shepherd boy, a-calling his flock to fold. He kissed her twice and turned around, and then they fell asleep. When they awoke, Lord Barnard's men were standing at their feet. How do you like my bed, he said, and how do you like my sheets? And how do you like my wedded wife who lies in your arms asleep? It's well I like your bed, he said, and great it gives me pain. I'd gladly give £100 to be on yonder plain. Rise up, you Sergeant Musgrave, rise up, you must put on. It'll not be said in this country, I slew a naked man. So slowly he rose up, and slowly he put on, and slowly down the steps he came, thinking to be slain. Here are 2 swords here by my side, and dear they cost me purse, and you shall have the best of them, and I shall take the worst. Oh, the first stroke that Musgrave stroke, it hurt Lord Barnard sore. And the first stroke that Barnard stroke, Musgrave stroke no more. And then up spoke the lady fair from the bed whereon she lay. I love you, my dear Musgrave, and for your soul I'll pray. How do you like his cheeks, he said, and how do you like his chin, and how do you like his dead body? Now there's no life within. It's more I like those cheeks, she said, and more I love his chin, and more I love that dead body than all your kith and kin. He's taken out his long steel sword to strike the mortal blow. Through and through the lady's heart, the cold steel it did go. A grave, Lord Barnard cried, to lay these lovers in. With my lady on the upper hand, she came from better kin. For I've just killed the finest knight who ever rode a steed, and I've just killed the finest lady ever did a woman's deed. It fell upon a holy day, there's many in the year. Sergeant Musgrave went to church to see fine ladies there, and some were clad in velvet red, and some in velvet pale. And then came Lord Barnard's wife, the fairest of them all. So you come to this age that I'm at, this beautiful age where you feel so fortunate at your marvelous good luck. Good luck and persistence, that's really all you need. Talent does not count for much if you have the other two. You come to this age and you wonder what you will leave behind, other than this mess on your desk. And you think a little bit about it. Radio, of course, is gone the moment you finish it and the red light goes out. It's all vanished. It's gone away. Books sit in the deep basements of libraries, unread books by great authors. It's so sad. Don't ever go down into the bowels of your library. You'll be grievously disappointed to see all the wonderful things down there that nobody will ever look at again. So I think about this. I've written a number of novels because I was an English major and it was my obligation, to climb that mountain, or in my case, that low hill, and I did. But if I look at them now, I see whole big swatches of them that I wish I could remove, rewrite, take away. More and more, I think that when I die at the age of 105, ancient, dried up old man, this old man, like Albert Wolson when I was a boy. He was the last living survivor of the Civil War. Well, of course he was a living survivor. The dead survivors were all gone by then. He was the last survivor of the Civil War. He'd been at Gettysburg. He was a drummer boy in the 1st Minnesota Volunteers. He had seen Abraham Lincoln. He was 105. He rode in all the summer parades in small towns. Winter parades, not so much, but he rode in a convertible in the back seat, this tiny man who got smaller and smaller as the years went by until he shrank. You couldn't see his face anymore. He just his little blue campaign hat and his tiny cadaverous hand waving to you. I'll be that man. I'll be Albert Wolson, 105. There he goes, the old radio man. He goes back. They used to play music on black vinyl records back then. And they had these big microphones, believe it or not. Music on black vinyl records back then, and they had these big microphones, believe it or not, and they did them out of studios with green acoustic tile on the walls. And no, I'll be a last survivor, and people will come to my funeral mass. Newspapers say that the number of Christians is in sharp decline, even people claiming to be Christians, which includes the hypocrites, of course. And so there may not even be an Episcopal church, but anyway, there'll be something. And I will not worry about that. I will go on, to whatever follows. Either I will find out that there is a life after, or I will not find out that there is not, either one. But they will gather my descendants and what will they bring up? I believe that what they will remember me for are limericks. With a limerick, perfection is possible. 5 lines, iambic pentameter, A, rhyme scheme. Perfection is not possible in radio, not even anything close. Not in a novel either. I'm not aware of a perfect novel. I liked War and Peace, but it's been a long time, But with a limerick, perfection is possible. And so, when I'm gone, I hope some 6th grader has Googled me and found some limericks. And that would be good enough for me. If a boy would stand up and recite a few things by heart, you should be able to remember a limerick, shouldn't you? I would think so. I used to do avant-garde dance with a blowtorch, blue paint, and no pants, which some people guessed was genius and the rest left quickly when given the chance. The young woman dropped to her knees and said to young Henry, "Oh, please, it will heighten my bliss if you do more with this and pay less attention to these." Sometimes you get a joke on your way home, you know? It comes to you later. It's even funnier when that happens, actually. There was an old singer of Syracuse who was shocked to hear his old dear accuse him of rushing and slurring and thereby obscuring the words that the writers of a lyric use. I mean, it's good, isn't it? I mean, I don't say that this is something that's going to change the world, but it's a really good limerick on Syracuse. He had a cell phone and he wrecked it. He wanted to be disconnected. He has never again been heard from since then. We think that he lives in Schenectady. It's not great, but I mean, considering the rhyme, you know, I mean, it's a tough hurdle to get over. The young fellow answered the ad and was hired and cried, "I'm so glad to be given this chance. I could pee in my pants." And they looked and they saw that he had. It's not bad, is it? I mean, it's something that a person could, you know, if your mind went in that direction, you could remember it. You and I know all sorts of things in common. I hope this will always be true in America. I have hope for the future. I believe that this is one thing that makes us a people, even as the hog farmers of Iowa are prepared to do the devil's work out there, even as the chicken farmers who are polluting the rivers of Iowa are prepared to do something so unbelievably stupid that we will be talking about this for days to come. Still, I do believe that we are one people. I believe this in my heart. I was brought up to believe that, and I still hold on to it. And one thing that makes us one people is that we know the same words to some things, and that's the right way to close this little seance here. Is to take you back to the third grade, the fourth grade, where you may have learned these My country, 'tis of the sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty, above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with Well, she was just 17, if you know what I mean. And the way she looked was way beyond compare. How could I dance with another when I saw her standing there? Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my... Oh, we were almost together there, weren't we? We're just almost. We're right on the verge. We're hitting some beautiful, unusual harmonies there. We're entering into Steve Reich territory. There, just briefly. Good night, ladies. Good night, ladies. Good night, ladies. We're going to leave you now. Merrily we roll along, roll along, roll along. Merrily we roll along over the deep blue sea. Oh, there's one more song we should sing. Oh, there are many other songs. I'm surprised you know the words. Beautiful. My faith is restored. I've gotten New Yorkers to sing My Country 'Tis of Thee. Oh, how often does that happen in this world? When was the last time New Yorkers sang America the Beautiful a cappella? Oh, give me a home where the antelope roam, when the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play, where they play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Oh, there was one more song I was going to sing with you. I think it's a song that is worth remembering. As I mentioned, Albert Wilson, the last survivor of the Civil War, a Civil War song. We're still fighting the Civil War in this country, you know. The South did not lose. The South became the Republican Party, and so we're still fighting over these same issues that absorbed the country back in the early 1860s. These are still live issues this year especially, and so this song means all the more now. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Bum, bum. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching. Oh, one more verse, just one more.
He hath sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the souls of men around his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. One last chorus and glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching. Oh, thank you so much for singing tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.